Donald Trump is touting a new middle-class tax cut that does not currently exist. Despite confusion from his fellow Republicans, he repeated the claim again last night.
We're going to be putting in a 10% tax cut for middle-income families. It's going to be put in next week. 10% tax cut. This is for middle-income people, all middle-income people, a big tax cut. 10%. We'll be putting it in next week.
Unfortunately for the president, Congress is out of session until mid-November. So any legislative action, quote unquote, next week, simply not going to happen. Joining me from New York, the senior advisor of Swing Left, Emily Tisch Sussman, and here in D.C., former Indiana Republican Congressman David McIntosh. He is the president for the Club for Growth and the co-founder of the Federalist Society. David, I will start with you. Typically, the Club for Growth is involved in a lot of these tax-related decisions here in Washington, D.C. Did you have any idea that this was brewing? Because from what I can tell, this does not exist as a congressional proposal.
Cassie, what I think the president's doing is really two things. One, he's capitalizing on something the House started in making permanent the middle-class tax cuts. And then if you listen to it, I think he's really signaling we're going to start running on a 10% tax cut for the middle class. I want to tell you about it now. Send me a Republican Congress. We'll get it done with them. So it's an issue that's going to come up after the election into the next Congress.
So you don't see him as misleading voters in that statement?
I don't think he was. By the way, if he wanted to do something right away, we have put forward, and his advisors are looking at, a executive order that would cut capital gains taxes. Now, that's a little bit different characterization.
It's not a middle-class tax cut.
It actually benefits the middle class in a huge way because of all of the retirement accounts that are just went down in the last couple of days in the market.
But
I don't think
capital gains, cutting capital gains taxes enormously benefits wealthy Americans.
But also it benefits everybody as the stock market goes up.
But they take a disproportionate share of those gains.
Well, they make a disproportionate share of the money. But the key thing here is what the president's doing is reflecting some of the information our poll showed for months, that the tax cut issue is the best issue for Republicans to win back the suburbs. Those are the areas they're falling way behind the Democrats on in about 40 or 50 seats. Our poll shows the number one issue they can use is that they would extend the middle class tax cuts, right, and that their Democrat opponent is against them.
Sure. Now, the one contrasting point I would say, and please weigh in on this, Emily, the Republicans are not running on the tax cuts for the corporations. And as David mentioned, the tax cut bill did not actually extend or make permanent the cuts for individuals that were included in the early years of that. So the Washington Post writes, quote, many Republicans have decided the issue is beyond salvaging. The Republican National Committee concluded in an internal memo last month that the party had, quote, lost the messaging battle, pointing to a private survey showing respondents by a 2-to-1 margin said the law benefits large corporations and the wealthy over middle-class families. So it does seem as though the president is responding to exactly this reality, the Republican failure to sell this tax cut as a middle-class tax cut.
Which is fascinating because Republicans have been campaigning on almost exclusively this issue for years. Look, the one place we are actually in agreement on is that the suburbs are looking very bad for Republicans and looking very good for Democrats. The number one issue we see over and over in all these districts is health care. So it's fascinating saying that tax cuts would be the best issue for Republicans to run on. They can't run on it. Like, I think the thing that has been missing in all of this in the Republican spin is that they are the governing party. They are fully in control of the government. They have made health care worse. They have made taxes worse, particularly for people in high income states like in New Jersey, New York. So if you're in Summit, New Jersey, if you're in Brookhaven, New York, if you're in Orange County, California, you're thinking to yourself, this is what my Republican Congress did, right? And so the president is just bringing this point up over and over, and he's leaving the Republican members with nothing to talk about because they enacted exactly what their plan was, what they had been campaigning on. They did it. And so people are saying, oh, this is the Congress that I got. I don't want this Congress.
David shaking his head. David, jump in.
Yeah. No, what this tax cut does is benefit most voters in New York and California as well because they're in the middle class and they got a real tax cut. What we're seeing here is the president ignored what the Republican Party did. You know, for years, many of us have said our own party is the stupid party. We make the wrong decision at the wrong time. The president is saying, I'm going to ignore that memo and I'm going to communicate to people that we're serious about extending the next round of tax cuts. And I think that'll help Republicans in this election.
So, David, here's my question, though. Mitch McConnell could extend this. The House passed their extension of the individual tax cuts. It cost $600 billion added to the deficit over the course of the next 10 years, more after that. And Senate Republicans are sitting on it. If it's such a great idea, why are they sitting on it?
I think they're waiting to get a bigger majority, honestly, Cassie. I think they've got a very difficult time doing anything in the Senate right now because it's split. It was 50-50. Now it's 51-49. And I think that is the reason Mitch is not doing anything now. When he comes back, he's already signaled that we need to do something more because of the deficit. And I think the tax cuts actually, I'm a big supply sider, so I think they will actually benefit that and raise more revenue than they cost.
And we should point out, Emily, that the suggestion Mitch McConnell seems to have to deal with the deficit, according to what he said on the campaign trail this past week, is dealing with or cutting perhaps entitlements.
Right, and people certainly understand that, especially when you get into those door-to-door conversations as so many volunteers are having. They really do understand that tax cuts, the ones that were passed and as they continue, are a backdoor way to get into cutting Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and people really just don't want to see it anymore. And if they do get, look, the biggest thing Trump has is his platform. What I'm hearing you're saying is that the best thing that he can do is actually ignore Republicans have actually done and come up with his own Republican messaging. But that gets cut through when you have those door-to-door conversations in volunteering. And honestly, that's why we're seeing this volunteer army that has really not been activated, really not since the Obama campaign in 2008. Not even then. This is even bigger now, of people saying we have to have these conversations and break through the noise. When they hear, when voters hear this is going to be a backdoor cut to entitlements, they really do not want to keep those Republicans in office.
I will say, for Republicans who have been trying to sell this tax cut, Josh Holmes, a former McConnell top guy, was quoted as saying that if the president doesn't say it, then nobody actually hears it. So I do think that helps explain what the president is trying to do here anyway.